Right, what's the next video that's coming? Can you give us a sneak peek?
Listen, at the moment I have no ideas. So I'm just, you know, if anyone has any ideas, flick it through. But we're just, as soon as we have something, you know, something in mind, we'll start working on it, and hopefully we can continue to put smiles on faces. Because, listen, when when I watch it myself, and I'm like, holy damn, you know, it's pretty funny. So, and we're getting a lot of good feedback. So, if there's any ideas out there, chuck it our way.
Seeing as you are the guru on all things that matter when it comes to watching boxers in action, then, if I could give you, for a serious moment, one super fight that could happen this year, if one could happen, because we've seen that Joshua Pulev is off, isn't it, at the moment?
Yep.
Who would you stick in that ring as a heavyweight? Who do you want to see?
I would like to see Joshua and Fury. That is the mega fight that I'd like to see this year. I think not only myself, the people involved in boxing, and I think the boxing fans around the world want to see, you know, one person holding all the belts, you know, the unified champion of the world.
If nothing else, make it happen as a lip sync battle.
Listen, if they don't want to fight, we can do other battles. There's a dancing battle, there's a lip sync battle. There's many battles that we can do. But the first one, the priority is the fight. But if not, then there's a lot of options out there.
I don't know. I'm going priority for the dance-off. Joseph, you are making us all smile. Thank you so much for coming on Sports Hour. And when do we expect the next one?
As soon as I have an idea, we'll start working on it. And, you know, as soon as we're done, you guys will see it.
The public demands it. Joseph Parker, thank you for coming on the show.
Have a great day today. Thank you.
You too. Go watch Joe's videos. They are well worth a smile any time of day. Just have a little search for Joseph Parker. Time now, though, on Sports Hour for Sporting Witness, and a moment that stunned the world of professional rodeo when Jonathan Holloway hit the first ever perfect score. He's been speaking to Leslie Wade.
It's the 26th of October 1991, and in a packed arena in Central Point, Oregon, Wade Leslie is about to achieve something that many thought impossible.
There's so many people in the industry that don't believe that there's such a thing as a 100-point ride.
The 27-year-old hangs on for dear life as a bull weighing more than half a ton whirls around and tries to throw him off.
It's hard to explain to somebody that's never done it. If you can imagine getting on a Volkswagen and driving it off a 10-foot cliff, that's about what you're feeling when you get on one of them. They jump in the air and come down and hit the ground.
Wade has to try to stay on for just 8 seconds, but to him, it feels like an eternity.
Everything's going 100 miles an hour, but it's just like really slow motion because everything's firing so quick in the brain.
In bull riding, the rider mounts an animal in a specially built pen and loops a rope under its body with one hand. The pair are released into the ring, and the bull jumps, kicks and twists in an effort to force the cowboy off.
It's not if you get hurt, it's when and how bad.
The excitement and danger have made rodeo one of the most popular sports in North America.
Everybody thinks those bulls don't look too big, you know, they don't look too bad to pen, but they run them into bucket shoot and you step over the top of one of them things, they grow real big.
Wade Leslie grew up in the small town of George in Washington State and first tried rodeo as a very young child.
Yeah, I got on a steer when I was 5 years old. Most kids started out on calves. It was kind of a family deal, and my uncle did it, and I always looked up to him, and he was pretty good at it. So that's right. I kind of kept doing it.
In 1986, at the age of 21, Wade achieved his dream of becoming a professional bull rider. But life on the road wasn't always easy, because success depends as much on the bulls a rider is drawn with as on the cowboy's skill. To maintain a steady income, Wade trained as a farrier and shoed horses between rodeos.
Sometimes I made money, and some days it was chickens, and some days it was feathers. That's why I had to work. When I come home, I'd work my butt off to pay the bills and keep the family happy, and I'd rob a little bit from that to go rodeo, and then I'd make a little money rodeoing, and I'd be good for a while.
But in 1991, Wade was enjoying a successful year.
Had several good high scores that year, went quite a few rodeos, and went to the finals, and I didn't even have to ride my bulls to win it. That's how much of a lead I had. And then I went to Central Point and knew who I had drawed. My confidence was real high, and I found out that that's who I had. And I knew that if I got him rode, I'd win the rodeo.
Before each rodeo, riders and bulls are matched at random. The scores are awarded by 4 judges, with half the possible 100 points for the bull's performance and the other half for the riders. Anything above 80 is considered very good, and anything above 90, exceptional. That day in Central Point, Oregon, Wade was competing with a top bull rider called Troy Dunn, and Wade was drawn against a bull named Wolfman.
I knew I'd be in the high 90s if I got him rode, and I'd dang sure win the rodeo probably. Of course, they saved me and Troy Dunn for last, and he was on Outlaw Skull. Canby, Oregon, a couple months before that, Troy Dunn had Wolfman and I had Outlaw. I come out on Outlaw and I made about 3-4 seconds maybe, and Troy was the same story on Wolfman. And that's the first time I actually got to see Wolfman go in person. Well, he had a reputation because he'd been out so many times and never ridden except for the one time. And he wasn't that big of a bull. He was only about 1,500 pounds. He's kind of a small bull and really fast, and that's why me and him got along, because I'm a little smaller than your average.
The small enclosure where the rider and bull rope up and get ready for the ring is known as the bucking chute, and just before the gate burst open, Wade and Wolfman ran into a problem.
I got on him and pulled my rope, and he laid down in the bottom of the bucket chute, and I started to get off, and the guy that owned it said, "No, just stay on him, he'll come back to you." And he stood up, and I called for him, and he went out, left out of there.
And in front of a packed crowd, Wade Leslie's life and the sport of bull riding changed forever.
Next thing I know, I was out over top of him, and all I could see were these little brown and gray hairs right in my face. I mean, they was almost touching my nose. That's how close it come to colliding with his head, and then the ride almost not happening. After that, I kind of picked my head up, and then he was gone. I lost him. He had me wound the end of my arm, and I just kind of rolled over the corner and waited for him to come around and pick me up, and he picked me up, and I was in the right spot and got him rode after that.
After completing a fabulous 8-second ride, Wade had to scramble away from the angry bull and out of the ring to safety.
Whistle blew, I jumped off, I hit the ground on my hands and knees, and he was right on my tail, and I got up off my hands and knees running, and he hit my foot with his nose, and it pushed it behind my other foot, and kind of stumbled a little bit, but I kept going, and he snorted at my butt all the way up for about 3 or 4 jumps, and I managed to stay on my feet and get away from him.
When did you realise it was going to be a good score?
As soon as I got off, I knew that I rode him good. I spurred him a little bit. I rode him with pretty much quite a bit of control. And yeah, you just know when you're going to be a good score when you get off. I knew I was going to beat 93 points. I didn't know it was going to be by that much. Didn't really sink in the gravity of what I did.
Did you ever imagine someone would score 100 points?
That's one of them goals you have that you always say, well, I'm going to be the first guy to score 100 points, but it's kind of a far-fetched goal. So yeah, there is some animosity in the rodeo world, whether that's a 100-point ride or not.
In the aftermath, Wade enjoyed a lot of attention, but not everyone was convinced by his record-breaking ride.
A lot of the guys from up here where I rode, they thought it was pretty great, but still you got the ones that say there's no such thing as a 100-point ride, and some say, well, you had to been there to see it.
What effect did it have in your career?
Give me a big confidence boost for sure, but there was that little added extra pressure that you're the 100-point guy when you show up, and they blow that all up out of the air when you get there. It kind of threw me off my game a little bit.
Wade enjoyed some success over the next 10 years until in 2001 when he had a bad car accident. Although he was lucky to survive, Wade suffered serious back injuries and had to come to terms with spending the rest of his life in a wheelchair.
Gradually things get easier and easier as you go along. You figure things out, and after a while it's not so tough. It's some days you have good days, some days you have bad days. I kind of was forced to retire before I wanted to. As far as traveling the country, going to rodeos, I don't. And it kind of gives me an itch I can't scratch.
These days, Wade enjoys fishing and hunting, and although it doesn't define him, he's still very proud of his rodeo success.
The 100-point ride is something I did. It's not who I am. But they can never beat me. They can only tie me unless they change the scoring system.
Leslie Wade with Jonathan Holloway in this week's Sporting Witness. Well, that's almost it from us this week, but we're going to end by celebrating the life of Tony Lewis. Tony changed the face of cricket forever, helping come up with a Duckworth-Lewis method for settling weather-affected limited overs matches, which is as complicated as it sounds. Andy Zaltzman, cricket journalist and comedian, joins us. Hiya, Andy. Good luck with this. In 30 seconds then, what's the Duckworth-Lewis method?
So, as you said, it's a means for setting a target for the team batting second in a limited overs cricket match when that game has been shortened by an interruption, whether that's rain or, as has happened in international matches, a swarm of flying ants or political protests or various other things. So basically what it uses is the resources remaining. So when a team is batting in cricket in a limited overs game, there's a set number of balls that it can face. That's 300 in a standard international 50 over match. And each team has 10 wickets. Now, so those are the resources they have left. The Duckworth-Lewis method used a calculation based on the precedent of limited overs cricket previously played and a mathematical formula using the resources remaining to the batting side to come up with a much fairer system of devising what that revised target should be in a rain-shortened match. Previously, they just used a proportion of, so if you lost half your overs, they would reduce your target by half, which strongly favoured the team batting second because they still had the same number of wickets. So, and there were various other methods used as well, which led to sort of hugely unfair matches. So the Duckworth-Lewis method, developed by Frank Duckworth and Tony Lewis, applied statistics, mathematics and precedent to a situation that had previously really just been done by a collection of poorly thought through regulations.
Yeah, I mean, there's no poor thought in all of that, is there? He was a mathematician, statistician. It sounds like a bit of a dream to me. When was it first used and when did it have its biggest test, just briefly?
It was first used in international cricket in 1997. It was fully adopted by the ICC for all international cricket for the 1999 World Cup, and it's been used since then. It came after a match in the 1992 World Cup, which ended with, under a previous rule, South Africa having needed 22 from 13 balls. There was a 12-minute rain break. They needed 21 from one ball, and that really highlighted how poor the previous systems. Biggest test, I think, has really been the advent of the 2020 format of cricket, which was first played in 2003 and internationally, I think, in 2005.
We've seen lots of it with the 2020s. I'm going to have to stop you in your prime then, Andy. We'll do a separate podcast entirely, just you and me and the Duckworth-Lewis. Thank you for coming on and just sharing a little bit of that. Tony Lewis, who died this week at the age of 78. Thank you for listening to Sports Hour, to Amy, to Craig, to Matt too, and thank you for your company. See you next week. Bye-bye.
This is the BBC World Service, where DMC tells his New York story.
Born and bred in this beautiful city.
I'm Daryl McDaniels, D from Daryl, MC from McDaniels.
The DMC of Run DMC.
New York was like the poster child for negativity, but hip-hop allowed the younger people to say, no, it ain't all bad.
New York Stories with Joe Pascal at bbcworldservice.com/documentaries. In 60 minutes, it's Music Life.
I'm Chani Lena, lead singer with the band Polisa. I'll be joined by Grammy Award-winning artist LaRue, Canadian guitarist and singer Dana Gavansky, and Afghan pop star Laha Saror. We are talking about how we release music and dreams of studying music from other cultures.
Stay with us. The newsroom is next on the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
At 10 a.m. GMT, welcome to the newsroom from the BBC World Service. I'm Charlotte Gallagher. China remembers the people killed by coronavirus there.
I mourned for the big calamity China has faced. What's happened to these people was very unfortunate. We should mourn for them.
We ask our correspondent whether the country and the government's attitude to public health and wet markets has now changed. Find out why Germany has accused the US of modern-day piracy over a shipment of masks. Spain records its lowest number of coronavirus deaths in a week. Sat at home trying to think of something to do? How about climbing Everest in your own home?
It's been tedious as much as painful. You know, the legs hurt and burn.
All that to come in the next half an hour. First, a news bulletin.
BBC News. Hello, this is Jerry Smith. Spain has recorded its lowest daily coronavirus death toll for a week, with 809 fatalities. The figure increases the Spanish total to more than 11,700. Steve Jackson reports.
These figures appear to support the Spanish Health Minister Salvador Illa's statement earlier this week that the crisis is reaching its peak. The Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is expected to extend the current lockdown by another 2 weeks, until at least the 26th of April. The government has shifted its position on wearing face masks. Having initially said they served little purpose outside of hospitals, public health officials now concede that masks may stop apparently healthy people spreading the virus, which they may be carrying without showing symptoms. Masks are now almost impossible to buy in Spain.
People across China have honoured those who've died from the coronavirus on a day of national mourning. More than 3,300 people have lost their lives in China during the outbreak. Michael Bristow reports.
At exactly 10 a.m. all across China, people stopped and bowed their heads as car horns sounded and air raid sirens wailed. A standstill was particularly poignant in Wuhan, the city where it all began. It was a chance to remember those who died from the virus and those who died fighting it, including Li Wenliang. The Wuhan doctor was initially reprimanded by the authorities after attempting to warn others about the disease. He's now officially been declared a martyr as the Chinese authorities seek to show people they understand the sacrifices they have made.
The Civil Aviation Authority in Bahrain has relaxed air travel restrictions, which have been in place due to the coronavirus pandemic. Officials have announced that transit passengers can stop over at the country's international airport, but only Bahraini nationals and foreign residents will be allowed to enter the country. The contest for the leadership of Britain's main opposition Labour Party has been won by Keir Starmer, until now the party's spokesman on exiting the European Union. Sir Keir, who's a former human rights lawyer and director of public prosecutions, is seen as a much more moderate politician than the man he's replacing, Jeremy Corbyn. Here's Rob Watson.
This is potentially a huge moment in British politics. Under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, a lifelong socialist and supporter of radical causes, Labour has struggled to provide much opposition to the Conservatives for most of the last 5 years. Sir Keir Starmer, a moderate, won this campaign promising to reverse that and to offer a forensic critique of government. The coronavirus crisis may complicate that task, as will the likely divisions within Labour over Mr Corbyn's legacy. Calamitous in the view of some members, a proud one to his defenders.
Rob Watson. World News from the BBC. In Cameroon, where coronavirus infections have increased rapidly in recent days to more than 500, there's growing surprise that President Paul Biya has not spoken a word in public about the growing threat. Our Africa editor, Will Ross, reports.
Apart from a photo of a meeting with an ambassador last month and a single social media post urging people to follow the government's coronavirus advice, there's been no communication from the 87-year-old president. Paul Biya doesn't make many public appearances, and he's known to spend significant amounts of time at a luxury hotel in Geneva. But the lack of visible leadership from a president who's been in power now for 37 years is surprising. The opposition politician Maurice Kamto has described Mr Biya's silence at a time of looming national crisis as criminal. A senior official from the president's party, Oswald Baboke, said it was a sign of mature reflection.
Netflix has announced that it will provide $1 million to help daily wage earners in the Indian film and television industry left without work by the country's total lockdown. The international film and entertainment streaming service says it will transfer the money into a relief fund. 2 looted Cambodian statues from the 10th and 11th centuries have been returned to the country's National Museum. A Buddhist blessing ceremony was held after the 2 objects arrived in the capital Phnom Penh from the United States. Kyoto University in Japan says a proof of one of the most complex problems in mathematics has been validated, and a paper on it will be published shortly. One of its professors, Shinichi Mochizuki, has spent more than 30 years working on what's known as the ABC conjecture. That's an area of number theory which examines some aspects of prime numbers. The professor's paper is more than 600 pages long, and his theory is said to be so dense and baffling that only about 12 people in the world will understand it.
Hello, you're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Charlotte Gallagher. China was brought to a standstill earlier as people across the country remembered those who were killed by coronavirus there. Chinese government figures say more than 3,000 people died, mainly in Hubei province, but many fear that number could be much, much higher. Car horns and air raid sirens sounded the moment when people commemorated the victims. Well, our correspondent Stephen McDonnell is in Beijing.
Today is already a traditional festival for remembering your loved ones who've passed away in years gone by. And at 10 o'clock local time, people stopped whatever they were doing. And we went out to the streets to have a look, and sure enough, the cars stopped. People started sounding their car horns. Elsewhere, there were sirens and other alarms going off. And for 3 minutes, from the top leadership of the country down to ordinary folks in the street, people were bowing their heads to remember those who've died. Now, of course, this is especially significant in the city of Wuhan, which is where this global pandemic started. Most of those who've died in China were in Wuhan. And here's some of what the people from that city had to say about it.
I mourned for the big calamity China has faced. What's happened to these people was very unfortunate. We should mourn for them.
I mourn the dead. I feel very sad.
Steve, more than 3,000 people have died officially, but some people fear that number could be a lot higher.
Yeah, so according to official figures, 3,300, more than 3,300 people have died in China. But some analysts think the reason it could be higher than that is that, well, firstly, we don't even think that all those who've been infected have been caught up and accounted for in the official figures. In remote areas, in a village, at the top of a hill or something, maybe that person didn't go to hospital, maybe they just got sick and died, then there is some speculation that in certain parts of the country, government officials who want to show off the performance, I guess, of their administration might have asked that some people who die are not actually accounted for as coronavirus deaths.
And you've lived and worked in China for a number of years. How much do you think China will change? I mean, a lot of talk around wet markets, and officials had said previously they would be closed and they hadn't been, and now we're in this situation. Do you think that might change in the future?
Well, the national government has already brought in a new regulation which they rushed in because there's no time to pass a law, which for the moment is banning the sale of this type of wildlife, so bats, pangolins and the like. And that's because scientists think, they haven't nailed this down yet, but there's a strong possibility that the coronavirus came from one of these animals, possibly into another, then into human beings at a wet market. Now, the city of Shenzhen's gone one step further and actually passed a law going much broader than the national regulation, also banning the sale of dogs and cats for meat. What they've done in Shenzhen is passed a law saying, because there are so many animals in the world, instead of listing all the animals you can't eat, rhinoceros, giraffe, whatever it is, I don't know, they've instead passed a law saying that here are the lists of white meat, as they've called it. If it's not on that list, you can't eat it. So the list sort of is chicken, pork, and things that are just in people's normal diet. Anything else beyond that can't be eaten.
That was Stephen McDonnell. US health officials say Americans should cover their faces when out in public to help curb the spread of coronavirus. But President Trump has said he won't be following the advice. Here's our North America correspondent, David Willis.
President Trump has repeatedly downplayed the severity of the coronavirus, and after outlining the advice of his own medical advisors for all Americans to wear a mask, he promptly added that he wouldn't be following it. Based on evidence suggesting that the virus can be passed on by people who've yet to develop symptoms, officials here have concluded that, as well as social distancing, it is also advisable for people to cover their faces in public. But President Trump said he simply couldn't see himself with a mask on his face.
Somehow sitting in the Oval Office behind that beautiful Resolute desk, the great Resolute desk, I think wearing a face mask as I greet presidents, prime ministers, dictators, kings, queens, I don't know, somehow I don't see it for myself. I just don't.
Travel restrictions and other coronavirus-related issues put paid to meetings with foreign dignitaries several weeks ago, of course. As well as New York, where the number of coronavirus deaths has now exceeded that of the terrorist attacks of September the 11th, Mr. Trump said he was concerned about the situation in New Orleans. Mardi Gras celebrations there in late February helped spread the virus before social distancing measures were introduced, and the death rate is now said to be more than double that of New York. Yet dismissive though the president is of his own administration's advice, the latest call from health officials seems to have struck a chord with his wife. On her Twitter page, the First Lady Melania Trump called on Americans to take social distancing and wearing a mask seriously as the weekend approached.
David Willis. Analysis from Imperial College London was a key influence on the British government's strategy to impose strict controls on the public to avoid coronavirus potentially killing many thousands of people. That work was led by Professor Neil Ferguson, who's been explaining to my colleague Michelle Hussain what the latest numbers are telling us about the spread of the virus in the UK.
We've looked at the data which has been collected in the last 2 weeks about how people have changed their movements, and that looks like there's been an 85% drop in the sort of typical movements, social movements outside the household, which is excellent news. It's what we need. But I would say the key issue we're trying to understand at the moment is how fast the epidemic will fall. And that isn't completely clear. We expect it to plateau really in the next week to 10 days. It's hard to be more precise than that. But then we can see two possible options: a very slow then plateauing and decay of infections over time and that demand on the healthcare system, or perhaps a rather faster one. And what's critical to determining that will be how do people behave, how much do they restrict their movements outside the household, their contact with others. And it is quite finely balanced at the current time.
So if they are flouted this weekend, that immediately changes the picture you've just painted?
Yes, that moves us to more a slightly more pessimistic scenario. We still think things will plateau, but we'll be at quite high levels of infection for weeks and weeks rather than seeing quite a rapid decline of the type seen in China. I think there's a great deal of work underway to look at how we can substitute some of the very intense social distancing currently in place with a regime more based on intensive testing, very rapid access to testing, contact tracing of contacts. But in order to substitute that regime for what we're doing now, we need to get case numbers down. We can't do it when we have as many people being infected as is currently happening. So the critical thing first is to get case numbers down. And then I'm hopeful, whilst we don't have all the answers about how we'll do it yet, but I'm hopeful in a few weeks' time we'll be able to move to a regime which will not be normal life, let me emphasise that, but will be somewhat more relaxed in terms of social distancing and the economy, but rely more on testing.
That was Professor Neil Ferguson. You're listening to the BBC World Service, and Jerry has the headlines.
China has temporarily come to a standstill to mourn the patients and medical workers killed by the disease. Spain has recorded its lowest number of coronavirus deaths in a week, suggesting the outbreak there is stabilising. And President Trump says he won't take the US health agency's advice to wear a face mask to prevent the spread of the disease.
Well, another story about masks now, because the coronavirus pandemic has led to an unprecedented international demand for protective clothing for medical and other key workers. And in Germany, a senior official in Berlin has accused the US of modern-day piracy for allegedly intercepting 200,000 face masks. Well, our correspondent in Germany, Damien McGuinness, told me more.
So Andreas Geisel, who is the Interior Minister for Berlin City State,
has accused the US of modern piracy. Those are the words he used. He said that this is no way to treat transatlantic partners, and he said even in times of global crisis there shouldn't be Wild West methods. That's how he put it. So some quite anti-American cliches there, but that's because the government in Berlin is outraged about this. Now, what they say is that around 200,000 N95 masks, now those are the medical masks which are incredibly effective, used for medical workers generally, had been ordered by Berlin City State. They were supposed to go to police officers here in Germany. They'd been ordered by an American manufacturer. They were being made in China. They were supposed to come to Germany via Thailand. And what Berlin officials say is that on the way, while they were being transferred between planes in Thailand, that US officials, according to these allegations, took these masks and sent them to the US. Now, the White House and this American firm have said they have no knowledge of this, so they appear to be denying these reports so far. But it does go to show, whether it's true or not, it does go to show this fight for protective equipment really throughout the whole world, and how crucial an issue this has become for all countries.
And the company that makes these masks is now being blocked, isn't it, from sending them anywhere? They've got to stay in the United States.
Yeah, that's right. So this company, 3M, they have already been under pressure from Donald Trump, who has said they can't send masks abroad if they're being made in the States. The company has actually said this is not very productive, really, because they've said that in order for countries in need to get protective equipment, you need to have a come and go. You need to exchange equipment, and you need to have this free trade. So the company itself has warned that if the US starts blocking imports and exports of particular equipment, then there's going to be a chain reaction. Germany, as I say, has been outraged by these allegations. However, Germany is also not without guilt here, because until a few weeks ago, German officials had also asked German companies not to export medical equipment. Now, the German government backtracked on that, and that's no longer the case. But it does go to show this pressure that countries are under all over the world to get in this medical equipment.
That was Damien McGuinness. Today is Senegal's 60th anniversary of independence, but what would in normal times have been a giant party has been cancelled due to coronavirus. Senegal recorded its first confirmed COVID-19 case on the 2nd of March. By the 3rd of April, it had more than 200. The country has taken drastic steps to try to contain the spread of the disease and is working hard to develop an affordable test. Our Africa editor, Mary Harper, reports.
Senegal's become something of an African leader in the fight against coronavirus, as well as declaring a state of emergency, closing its land, air and sea borders to all but essential goods traffic and banning public gatherings. It's focused on tracking potential infections. Anyone who's been in contact with an infected person has been put up in a hotel and quarantined for 14 days. The World Health Organization's mantra is test, test, test. But tests are time-consuming and expensive, something Africa can ill afford. That all may be set to change. Senegal's working with a British company to develop a quick, simple $1 test. Validation tests are underway. As the test can be performed without any need for electricity, it would be of particular use for Africa's rural communities, which often don't have access to power. More controversially, Senegal's been pioneering the use of an anti-malarial, chloroquine, to treat coronavirus patients. The WHO says its effectiveness has not been proved. Other respected medical institutions have warned against the hype surrounding the drug. But Senegal's culture minister and government spokesman, Abdoulatif Coulibaly, told the BBC that doctors in the country have seen what he describes as rapid improvement in patients treated with chloroquine.
That was Mary Harper. Right, we're going to get away from coronavirus news for a minute, because in Britain, the next leader of the opposition Labour Party has just been announced. Sir Keir Starmer replaces Jeremy Corbyn. The other candidates were Lisa Nandy and Rebecca Long-Bailey. But because of the coronavirus pandemic, the announcement was made in an email. Our political correspondent Vicky Young is at Westminster.
Keir Starmer
many thought was the front runner in all of this, really from the beginning. But Sir Keir Starmer, the new Labour Party leader, with a huge challenge ahead of him, and I think it's going to be incredibly interesting to see what path he takes. You know, there were some in the party who saw him as a centrist Blair-like figure. You know, I don't think that's where he's coming from. He is of the left of the party, certainly, but not in the same vein as Corbyn. He's been quite careful throughout this campaign to give some commitments, but I would say very careful about saying exactly what he's pledging to do in terms of, you think about renationalisation, for example. He talked about backing common ownership for rail and mail and water and all the rest of it. Now, will he go down that road or not? Some huge judgments for him to make in the coming months and years.
Vicky Young. As Russian cities go into lockdown to try to contain coronavirus, Moscow is using the latest technology to keep track of residents. City officials are using a giant network of tens of thousands of cameras installed with facial recognition software, which they plan to couple with digital passes on people's mobile phones. It's prompted concern about whether such widespread surveillance will ever be rolled back. Sarah Rainsford explains how the system works in her own Moscow neighbourhood.
Hi, Vladimir.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello, how are you?
The other week, Vladimir Bukovsky had an odd experience.
Thanks for agreeing to speak to us in these strange conditions.
We spoke online because Moscow's under coronavirus quarantine, and like most people, he's stuck at home. A few weeks back, though, he was self-isolating after a trip abroad. Then one night he took his rubbish out to the yard. Half an hour later, the police were at his door.
Now, they say that was a face recognition system. You know, I seen this camera near entrance of my building, but I never thought that it is worked.
Thus, centralized Moscow City video security system consisting of more than 100,000 cameras installed.
In fact, there is a vast network of those cameras across the city. They were installed with facial recognition software a few months ago, a high-tech new tool to catch criminals. Now, that technology is being used to enforce the coronavirus quarantine.
While the search time remaining under 10 seconds.
I've just come out of my block of flats and onto the street. Today it's extremely quiet. A metropolis of more than 12 million people is now officially in lockdown. And if I look around, there are cameras on the buildings absolutely everywhere here. Now, these cameras are basically scanning the faces of everyone here on the streets in real time and sending instant alerts to the police about anyone who might be violating the quarantine.
And they already caught more than 500 people.
Artyom Kukharenko from Entech Lab developed the software that's being used by the Moscow authorities. He told me, online of course, how it can track people with COVID-19, for example, if they go walkabout.
One of the big advantages of our system is that all the alerts will be instant. And if we're talking about virus protection, it's very important to react in real time.
The software also works to detect crowds and measures distance between people. And the facial recognition even works if you're in a face mask. In Vladimir's case, a short walk to the bins was enough to get busted.
What do you feel about the principle of so much surveillance?
For pandemic, it's okay. All measures are okay.
And after?
After, I hope the world would be the same as it was. I really hope. After that, we don't need this control, this total control.
Does that worry you?
Yes, it worries me. It can be used over people who are in opposition to government, for example.
A week into lockdown, the city government's already announced a digital pass system that would mean we have to register our data online to go to the shops, then get a code on our mobile phones that the police can scan. It's not being implemented just yet, but there's also talk of GPS trackers and of mobile phone companies handing over data to the authorities. Some Russians fear it has all the makings of a digital gulag.
That was Sarah Rainsford. Now let's get some other stories from Jerry.
Trade unions in Britain representing cabin crew and pilots are demanding action to prevent staff contracting coronavirus while carrying out their work. Several British Airways staff have fallen ill in the past fortnight after working on long-haul flights. Here's our transport correspondent, Tom Burridge.
British Airways has, like other airlines, reduced its in-flight service. But the pilots' union BALPA said it was bonkers that duty-free is still offered on some flights. And one pilot claimed BA had been slow to protect staff. He said until recently, crews were sometimes travelling shoulder to shoulder on buses at airports. British Airways insisted that personal protective kit was available for crews.
The South Pacific island states of Tonga and Samoa say they're extending restrictions despite not having reported any confirmed cases of the coronavirus. The announcement applies to a nationwide lockdown in Tonga and a state of emergency in Samoa, where flights in and out of the island have been suspended. Meanwhile, the authorities in Egypt have shut down the country's main cancer hospital in Cairo after 3 doctors and 12 nurses tested positive for COVID-19. The hospital will be sterilised and preventative measures will be put in place to ensure the safety of medical teams. The hospital will reopen on Monday, but only for urgent cases. More than 120,000 people have signed a petition calling for the reinstatement of a US Navy captain who was relieved of his command after demanding stronger measures to halt the coronavirus outbreak on his aircraft carrier. The Navy command said he'd caused panic. More than 100 sailors on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt had caught the virus. An investigation will decide whether Captain Crozier will be reassigned or face disciplinary action. The American singer Pink has donated $1 million to medical charities after testing positive for COVID-19. The Grammy Award winner said she and her 3-year-old son Jameson have now made a full recovery. She's also urged the US government to expand its coronavirus testing program.
Thanks, Jerry. With billions of people staying in their homes because of the coronavirus lockdown, many have turned to endurance tests to fill their time. And on Friday evening, one man in the south of England completed an ascent akin to the highest peak of the world, as Duncan Kennedy reports.
It was 4 days ago that John Griffin began his virtual ascent of Mount Everest using the stairs in his own home. It had started as a joke with his wife when he'd said that he'd end up climbing the equivalent of Everest with all his self-isolation time. When a friend offered to sponsor him to actually do it, John couldn't resist the challenge.
I've got to sit down for a minute.
Over 4 sometimes painful days, he's climbed the 29,000 feet equivalent of Everest, amounting to 41,000 steps, all checked by a computer.
It's been tedious as much as painful. You know, the legs hurt and burn.
John's family and neighbours came out to celebrate as he summited last night. And whilst it may have taken bags of frozen peas strapped to his knees to help him through it, he says his appetite for more COVID-19 challenges has now peaked.
Feel bad for sitting on my sofa all day yesterday. You've been listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Charlotte Gallagher, and we've got a news roundup with Jerry coming next.
This is the BBC World Service, where DMC tells his New York story.
I never wanted to be in show business. I was just writing these rhymes for me. I never wanted y'all to hear it. I never wanted you to hear it. I never wanted anybody to hear it.
Born and bred in this beautiful city, he's the devastating mic controller himself. The DMC of Run DMC.
D from Daryl, MC from McDaniels. New York was like the poster child for negativity. But hip-hop allowed the younger people to say, no, it ain't all bad. We wanted to be an example of goodness that could come out of darkness. And that's why Run DMC was so effective. New York City, all race, creeds, colors, and religion. You can find yourself here, and then you can take yourself all over the world to inspire, motivate, and educate.
New York Stories with Joe Pascal at bbcworldservice.com/documentaries.
Miami, a city of contrasts, and you don't need to see them. Blind from birth, I can hear them and touch them. The richness of the music and the food, the warmth of the sun, but the knowledge that in the cool water, sharks lurk.
There's one right there, they're there. Where?
But even then, Miami natives want to reassure.
Yeah, they don't do anything.
The sounds of the city, Miami in all its contrast.
BBC News with Jerry Smith. Spain has recorded its lowest daily coronavirus death toll for a week, with 809 fatalities. The figure increases the total number of deaths to more than 11,700. But it appears to support the Spanish health minister's statement this week that the crisis was reaching its peak. China has mourned the victims of COVID-19 by observing a 3-minute silence, bringing the nation to a halt. At exactly 10 a.m. local time, people stood in silence as car horns were sounded. China has officially recorded 3,300 deaths. In Cameroon, where coronavirus infections have increased to more than 500, there's growing surprise that President Paul Biya has not spoken a word in public. The opposition politician Maurice Kamto has described Mr. Biya's silence at a time of a looming national crisis as criminal. The Civil Aviation Authority in Bahrain has relaxed air travel restrictions which have been in place due to the coronavirus pandemic. It's not clear what's triggered the decision. Netflix has announced that it will provide $1 million to help daily wage earners in the Indian film and television industry left without work by the country's 3-week-long lockdown to fight coronavirus. Netflix has also committed up to 4 weeks of pay for crew members who are scheduled to work on its units in India. In other news, the contest for the leadership of Britain's main opposition Labour Party has been won by Keir Starmer, until now the party's spokesman on exiting the EU. Mr. Starmer is seen as a much more moderate politician than the man he's replacing, Jeremy Corbyn. And Kyoto University in Japan says a proof of one of its most complex problems in mathematics has been validated. One of its professors has spent more than 30 years working on what's known as the ABC conjecture.
What do I know about Miami? Well, I know its beaches and its nightclubs are the playground of America, and I'm standing on South Beach, one of the most popular at the moment. That's at the southern tip. I know it's got a reputation for crime, which some people say is undeserved, and I know that at its southern tip it's about 90 miles from Cuba. But I'd like to know a lot more, with just my ears to guide me, which is what we do on Sounds of the City.
She's local. Well, we're both from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But she's local because her mother lives here.
Yeah, no,
So
I was born here. I haven't lived here since the 70s, no.
Why would you rather not live here?
Because it's the Wild West.
South Beach is the usual mix of trippers, sun worshippers, salesmen, and one lady who's come home pretty unwillingly by the sound of it.
Nobody controls traffic. Nobody controls growth. It's corrupt. It's not a good place to live. It's only a good place to visit.
Right.
We're going to take the boat tour later.
There's all these art shows
There are
that's
art shows
coming
all
up,
week long.
starting actually
today.
Well,
They're really
tomorrow.
big. They're big on their art shows, aren't they?
Yes, very big.
Yeah.
Very big.
Sounds of the City is based on what I, born blind, can hear, taste, touch and smell. So I always go looking for at least one other blind person who knows the city well. George Fernandez came here with his parents from Cuba when he was 8. Two blind people looking for each other in a big city is bound to be a bit of a car crash. So George and I do what a lot of people do nowadays when they want to meet. We talk on our smartphones.
Hello?
Hello, George.
Okay, you're right in front of the building?
Sorry?
No. Here.
Peter! George!
Yeah, nice to meet you,
It's-
sir. Where are you at?
It's so much easier talking to somebody in the flesh than on the phone.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome to Miami.
Are you
This
Norma?
is my fiance, Norma.
Hello, Norma. What struck us just coming in is how big Miami is. It's huge, isn't it?
Well, it's a very busy city. It is. It is large. Just getting from the north side of the county or the city all the way to the south, it's horrible. It is.
Why?
horrible.
Why is it so
Well, they have
horrible?
no tube.
No.
But public transportation is not as efficient as it's supposed to be.
So what do you do? And what do you use?
I usually use paratransit, which is transportation for the disabled, or Uber or Lyft, depending on the circumstances. Yes, it is stressful. But other than that, it's a beautiful city. I love it. I will not change it for anything in the world. A block and a half away, we have the bay. It's a beautiful park. We can sit out there. There's benches, and the families go out there and just walk and just enjoy each other. I mean, it's beautiful out there. Ladies and gents.
Okay. I think it's coming from a home. They're having some
Party?
sort of event. Right. So that's where you hear it coming from. And it looks like it's like a family party or some sort.
So let's go crash it. This is where we come out and really enjoy each other. As you can hear, you have an airplane going above us. You hear the water splashing against the wall. You got music in the background. There's a nice breeze.
I was born in Nicaragua. I came here when I was about 8 years old, and with my family.
No, guys. We're going to turn a little bit right here to there. We're going to get to the ledge. Listen to your left. That's a boat in the water.
Okay. That's a nice spot.
That's a boat in the water. And I hear an airplane coming to your right. There it is.
You're right.
And if you really pay attention, you're going to hear kids playing. If you come out here late in the afternoon where it's just nice and, you know, quiet, we can sit here at the ledge and just hang our feet over the ledge and really enjoy each other. I mean, it's so peaceful. And there's a lot of fish in this part of the bay. And we could be sitting here talking, and out of the blues, the pelican just dives into the water in front of us and grabs a fish. And it's amazing how much we enjoy it here. Here comes a splash in the water, and Norma screams out, "He got a fish! He got a fish! The pelican got a fish!" And you can hear anything and everything you want to hear. We have people from literally all over the world. You can be walking the streets and you can be listening to somebody speak Creole, to somebody speak French, to somebody speak German, Brazilian. You can feel the heritage, you can hear it, you can smell it because of the food. I mean, you name it.
If there's an atmosphere which is saying, you know, we now want to kind of shut up shop on who comes in, perhaps people coming in from Cuba, people coming in from Mexico, is that having an effect on day-to-day life?
Here in Miami? No, I don't think so. The way I was brought up here in the States is we are the great melting pot. That's how the United States was founded. Migration was what made our country. If you go out to South Beach, which is the most trendiest place in, I could say, Florida, if you want to put it that way.
Oh, is that ukulele?
Yes, sir.
Is it? Would you mind if I touched it? It's my first instrument. Was a ukulele.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Hang on, I'll have to put my stick down.
Oh, I understand.
My dog eats fleas.
It should be too.
Where are you from?
I'm from like Panama City Beach area.
Panama City Beach?
Yes, sir. The hurricane messed it up pretty bad.
Oh,
so I moved down here for like school and stuff. And
yeah. Do you busk, or are you just playing for fun?
I'm just kind of playing around.
Yeah?
Just hanging out, really.
Yeah, hanging out.
Yeah. $2 here and there.
Yeah, maybe you could.
Yeah, there's a lot of bands playing, you know, just around.
Take a good look at my face. It's out of place. The tracks of my tears.
Esmeralda. Now we have 2 different species of scorpions in Florida. Esmeralda comes from Africa. I like her because we can handle her. I'll tell you what, if he wants to, he can hold her.
I'm not sure I do want to hold a scorpion.
She's a professional.
Is she?
She'll tickle a little bit.
Whoa, hey, she's got quite big feet.
Yeah, and now here,
take
your finger.
Yeah?
Here, you start up here.
You promise me she's not going to...
No, she won't. She's, like I say, she's a professional.
Oh, she's huge.
Yeah, you can feel it. That's the claw.
Yeah?
Okay, they have 8 little legs. She's going to walk and then along the tail.
Yeah?
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. She's...
Well, she's going up the arm. Yeah. She's supposed to do that.
Yeah, I'm watching her. But you can feel the stinger.
Ow.
But see, it doesn't do anything. She won't do anything. But you can see that's the poison sac.
But her claws are out. How long is she? It's quite long, isn't she?
Yeah, okay, just go slow and you can feel her all the way along.
Right, okay.
Just go easy. She's a good girl.
Why am I doing this? Hello, Esmeralda. Oh, she's off again.
Yeah, she'll walk. I got her, don't worry, I have her.
She's running. That used to be, well, still is, one of my favourite songs.
Oh,
it really is, I'm not kidding.
No, I love that song.
No.
I like Smokey a lot. He's one of the best songwriters the world's ever had.
Miami may be the playground of the United States, but people still have to go to work here. They don't have a subway system, which seems very surprising to me. Regular listeners will know that as a blind man, I love subway systems. They've got a kind of SkyTrain, one track, running really from the south of the city into downtown Miami. I'm going to give it a try. Oh, a train has suddenly leapt into view.
Center Station.
Yeah, is that this side?
This side to your right.
To my right. Do they get announced, the stops?
So this will do a loop all the way till, it depends on where you're going downtown.
Right, I'm on.
Please stand clear of the doors and hold the handrails. This train will depart momentarily.
Seems funny to think we're travelling about, I don't know, 12 feet above the street. Because it's basically like a SkyTrain. It must be great actually, because of course, you know, in a lot of cities you're travelling underground.
Please hold on. The train is approaching.
I was holding on, lady.
Park Station.
It depends on the time of the day, because you know everybody's moving. But in the middle of the day, the traffic stops and then it comes back up around 6 o'clock when everybody's going home.
So most of the day is a rush hour.
This is Museum Park Station.
I've just walked into the Welcome Centre. I wonder how welcome I'll be. I've got another tricky question to ask. Hello. Well, all it is, I keep hearing all these names of, you know, like we're here on South Beach and there's Coconut Grove, and what I'm trying to get an idea of is the shape of Miami, because it all seems to be little bits strung together.
Well, it is. It goes south. South Beach would be like a more a cultural term. It's not a geographic term, but it refers to the tippity of this area. So I would imagine like a beak, right? And where the tip of the beak would be South Beach. And it kind of opens up to more modern construction. But the historic area would be right here in South Beach.
Has it got a centre?
You're smack dab in the center of everything right now. Ocean Drive, 10th and Ocean, I would say would be the exact middle of the historic district.
Can't go anywhere without music here, can we? You got Bing Crosby in the background.
We do. We try our best to, you know, keep it within the theme.
You might be hearing music, jazz, or depending on what section or what block we're walking on. It is an art district. It is it's a tourist area. There's little restaurants all over the place. So depending what you want to eat, or what you want to smell, or what you want to taste, just by walking and just getting the sense of the music that's playing, you know what you're gonna eat.
So do you say, I can hear that sound, therefore I'm on this street?
Oh yeah. I can tell you this, you can be walking Little Havana, and all you're gonna hear is a lot of the Hispanic music playing, or the Cuban music, or even a radio station in the background. It's amazing what you can hear around you. And it's difficult to understand, am I on this street or am I on that street? Because the sounds could be coming from all corners. This is a lively city.
There seems to be a lot of shops
Macy's is gone. Macy's is gone.
But if you really want to know what's going on in a city, talk to the street cleaners. They're the ones who are likely to tell you how it's down and dirty.
Oh no,
See, I picked up a lot of cardboard because we got to pick. Oh, we had to pick up the cardboard too, that the homeless people leave after they wake up. We don't pick up poop, human poop. So.
You must have seen a few sights in the morning when you come in.
You know, you can just smell human feces. Human feces smell worse than dog.
So there's a downside to a party town, yeah?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The homelessness. Common respect, you know. But yeah, this is downtown. This is public. People walk up and down the street. Do they have are they being mindful, or just selfish, or just don't, you know?
Isn't this a lovely day?
So the predominant tourist areas would be Ocean Drive, Washington and Collins, Espanola Way and Lincoln Road Mall. The rest is more or less residential, but the construction is nautical Art Deco, which is very particular and special because you'll only see that in this area. And we have over 1,000 buildings, which no other place in the world has that.
Just tell me, you know, from a blind person's point of view.
Yes.
What is Art Deco?
The best way to describe it is a break from Art Nouveau, and the break from that came in the 20s in the form of Art Deco, meaning cleaner lines, more geometry, more simplicity in the lines.
I was just going to press the light of it.
Yeah.
Is this actually...
There you go.
Oh, can I get a flame?
No, there's no fuel in it.
Oh, right. What a shame.
There you go. So the second figure is a ceramic figure.
Oh, I like that.
It's a figure. It's a fully fledged woman in there.
It's a very nice texture as well. So the buildings do this on just a much bigger scale, yeah?
The buildings would be similar to like this shape, I would say. There are lines that convey movement and lines that convey power.
So they're all diagonals, really,
correct.
aren't they?
Like diagonals or parallel straight lines.
Yeah.
A lot of that going on, a lot of parallelity.
Yeah.
It's a good example of what Art Deco style is.
You can't come to South Beach without going for a swim, so I am just going to wander in now. And there are some rumours, only rumours, that there are baby sharks down here. I don't know if that's really true. I'm not sure why I'm going in if there are.
There are sharks there. Probably about 5 of them, 4 or 5.
Do we know if they've got teeth yet?
They have got teeth, but they're not. There's one right there. They're there.
Where?
They're behind you, quite away behind you.
Oh, really?
They're normal in this area.
Yeah?
Yeah, they don't do anything. They're more scared of humans than, humans are scared of them.
So they don't bite?
No, that's only in the movies. Yeah, the water's so clear that there's not going to be a mistaken identity thing, which is how sharks normally bite people.
Does it scare people when they turn up?
Yeah, it scares people all the time, but then they come talk to me and I explain to them that there's no risk.
Like I do.
If they were dangerous, I wouldn't let all these people swim. But they mind their own business.
Do you get anything else in that's kind of, exotic or a bit dangerous?
Animal-wise or people-wise?
I meant animal-wise or fish.
Every once in a while we'll have a gator come out of the ocean or a snake. Iguanas like to swim also. So that'll scare, a couple people.
But for the average Miami dweller, there are far worse things to worry about than baby sharks.
The hurricane did pass about close to 100 miles south of us. And the winds were not as strong. But they've always said the calm before the storm. And you do see that calm. You can hear it in the air. You don't even hear the birds chirping.
So they know, the birds know.
Oh, they do. Yes, of course they do. And the closer the hurricane gets, the wind starts getting stronger. You hear the howling of the wind. And it can be very scary. If you are in a direct hit of one of those storms, especially like the one that just passed not too long from here, it is scary.
Can you compare that sound with anything?
You heard a freight train right next to you? That's how it sounds like. If it's close enough to you and you're in the center of the storm, everybody describes it as a freight train going by for hours. It can be pretty scary. And if you're not well protected and the window starts breaking and the roof starts going off and your house starts falling apart,
it gets pretty scary.
Guys, welcome.
Can we get on that boat, do you think?
You want to get on this boat? Just one?
Honestly, yeah.
Earplugs?
Earplugs.
They're for when the boat goes fast. It gets loud for about 5 minutes.
How fast does it go?
1,000 miles an hour.
I bet it does.
Miles are like a rocket. No, it only goes.
You're kidding me.
I am.
You're kidding. They call Florida the Sunshine State. It's just begun to rain. I think they should rename it the Alligator State because everybody goes on about alligators. I'm going on this trip and I'm hoping that at the end of it I will have held an alligator. Yeah?
You are. Where you are.
Okay, thank you. That's a long way. We're on the boat. Yeah, here's some more.
The canal's our best chance to see the alligator.
That is why I decided to teach them a lesson, and I showed them exactly who is the strongest.
Why don't we just get this started? I don't need another pointless story.
Especially when you are born there, they treat you a little different. Just to go there now, let's say myself, if I need to go visit, my expenditures to visit there are extremely.
Why would
Well, I'll
have
give you
to
an
pay
example.
more? Yeah.
If I need to travel right now, let's say I want to visit family in Cuba, I need to get a Cuban passport.
Thank you, Kenny, for Mafuta Jam. Lerato. Shop Kenny, Daniel from Eden Park.
Shop Denny. Also got a tweet in from Dande, anything Lerato Boom Shaka. Ooh, going Mafuta style now. Feeling the vibe. You know how you did it back in the 90s with Kick-Ass Kenny. Kicking it with the Mafuta Jams. Coming up next, though, in the next hour, it's Classic Club Jams. George Benson Red, Sharon Red, and Stevie Wonder in the mix. But right now, it is 1 o'clock.
This is Eyewitness News.
Good afternoon, I'm Ayanda Nyati. Higher Education Minister Blade Nzimande has urged the 76 South African students repatriated from China to not defy the lockdown regulations here at home now that they've completed their quarantine period. They were isolated at a hotel in Kempton Park for about 14 days following their return to the country last month. They'll be leaving the hotel and reunited with their families today. Bonga Vilane has more.
Minister Blade Nzimande has lauded the students for being disciplined while they were in quarantine for over 60 days. They were first kept in China for 51 days before being cleared and repatriated to South Africa. They spent the past 14 days at the Beachwood Hotel here in Kempton Park and have been observed by health workers. Nzimande says they should join the rest of the country in adhering with the regulations of the 21-day national lockdown.
The President has said to me, I must say a few things to you. Firstly, that he is very, very happy that we have been very disciplined, allowed to be quarantined here, but most importantly is happy that we have all been declared negative.
4 students who arrived at a later date will remain under quarantine at the hotel. Bonga Lulane, Eyewitness News, Kempton Park.
The Medical Research Council says it's appalled by calls from 2 French scientists to have the COVID-19 vaccine tested in Africa. Experts around the world are racing against time to have the vaccine ready before a complete collapse of medical systems across the globe. The vaccine is now being trialled in European countries and Australia, with some questioning the motive behind having the process moved to our continent. Edwin Ntsi has more.
The call by the French scientists has now caused a stir. They wanted the COVID-19 vaccine to be tested in the African continent. The Medical Research Council's Linda Gray says the suggestion is disturbing.
The South African Medical Research Council is appalled by the attitude of French scientists, implying that because we are short of goods and medicines and have poor access to ventilators and other care to optimize the management of COVID-19, that we should be the place where we experiment on people.
The suggestion has also caused widespread condemnation amongst Africans who feel that the Western countries feel hard done by the fact that the African continent has less COVID-19 cases. Edwin Ntsi, Eyewitness News.
Moving to the Eastern Cape now, where a traffic official has died in a car accident while travelling back from a COVID-19 deployment operation. Franz Kuman was based at the Struttendale Traffic Department in Port Elizabeth. Shamila Fisher has more.
The Eastern Cape Transport Department says traffic officer Franz Kuman was driving along the R75 when his car hit a kudu. This resulted in him losing control of the vehicle, which veered off the road. The officer was alone in the car at the time of the crash. The department has since sent condolences to Skuman's family and colleagues who he had been working with at the COVID-19 border post station just yesterday. The deceased had more than 20 years of experience in traffic law enforcement. He planned to retire this year. Shamila Fisher, Eyewitness News.
A quick lunchtime update on the global coronavirus figures so far. There are currently 1.1 million cases across the globe, while over 230,000 people have recovered from the illness. More than 60,000 others have now died. Here at home, there are currently 1,505 known infections, with about 7 confirmed cases and 2 deaths that are still to be confirmed. In the very latest global developments, India has just reported its biggest single-day jump in new coronavirus cases, with 601 infections in just 24 hours. The country now has over 3,000 cases and 86 deaths. In the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the government there will continue to keep the social distancing restrictions under review and relax them only if and when there's evidence that shows that they're able to. Johnson, who's tested positive himself, says he's written to the leaders of the opposition parties to combat the pandemic. And in France, 600 members of the military have contracted contracted the coronavirus. Authorities say the situation is constantly evolving, but has not affected any of their operations. For the very latest on the COVID-19 pandemic, hit ewn.co.za. And in other news, founder of the Freedom Front Plus has been remembered by his party as a formidable leader who took charge even in the face of harsh criticism. The 81-year-old died yesterday due to what's been described as natural causes. He once led the South African Defence Force as commander during apartheid and was at the helm of the FF Plus during the country's transition into democracy. He's been celebrated by the organization he started for charting a clear way forward during adversity. Party leader Pieter Groenewald.
His legacy in the party will be that he established it, and because of his planning, we survived. We are still continuing, and everything was built on the foundation of the start when General Constant Viljoen was the leader of the Freedom Front Plus.
Constant Viljoen is survived by his wife and 2 children. On the weather front, it's a rainy and cloudy day in Gauteng. The temperatures have peaked at highs of just 17 and 18 degrees. Cape Town's fine today, a fresh southeasterly wind along with a high of 25. The top story in Eyewitness News this hour. Higher Education Minister Blade Nzimande has urged the 76 South African students repatriated from China to not defy the lockdown regulations here at home now that they've completed their quarantine period.
Eyewitness News. In touch, in tune, and independent. For the latest, log on to ewn.co.za or ewn.mobi. EWN Sport.
Good afternoon, I'm Anthony Teixeira. We're going to start with football, where FIFA have confirmed that the men's football tournament at the Olympic Games age range will be raised. Currently, the rules restrict players to under 23s, with the 3 overall players per side. However, FIFA have stated that the age limit will need to be increased by a year following the postponement of the 2020 Games. The Tokyo Olympics were moved to June of 2021 amidst the coronavirus pandemic. The English Premier League confirmed that the 2019-2020 season has been suspended until further notice and will only start once it is safe and appropriate to do so. Premier League sides have also agreed to a proposed 30% pay cut during the coronavirus outbreak to players. The £125 million that will be raised will support the British health system as well as the Football League. Defender of Newcastle, Danny Rhodes, has revealed that it was strange to hear the public demand for players' pay cuts, but admits that behind the scenes, all of the players were already in consultation over where the money should be going to. West Ham Vice Chair has also confirmed that a 30% wage cut will go to Karen Brady during this whole debacle due to solidarity. And in Europe, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid players have taken a 70% pay cut, while Italian giants Juventus have announced that players and manager Maurizio Sarri have agreed to freeze their pay for 4 months. And finally, reports coming out of Australia are that the rugby union will dismiss the chief executive Raylene Castle. This is due to growing tensions between the players union and her office, as well as an increase in financial worries. Phil Kearns, a former Wallabies captain, has dismissed reports suggesting that he would take over the position. Anthony Teixeira, EWN Sport.
Your favorites every weekend. 702 Music with Kenny Maestri.
Good afternoon, I'm with you through until 2 o'clock, and then it's Non Buerta on your radio from 2 to 6 p.m. right here on 702. Don't forget, just after EWN and Sport at 5 o'clock, she's got In Concert with Non. And today, the music of Sir Elton John. Yeah, your song, Daniel, Can You Feel the Love Tonight? Sacrifice, great songs just for you on 702 Music. Oh, don't forget the one he did with George Michael, live, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. Also, Sorry Seems...
Channing Lena, lead singer and lyricist with the band Polisa from Minnesota in the U.S.